Hello, my name is Joseph. I work for HCPA as a health promotion educator, and today I'm going to be taking you through some falls prevention training. So to start off and give us some context behind what we're going to be discussing today, I'm going to invite you to consider the following 4 questions. So what is a fall? What is the definition of a fall? If you are going to talk to your family, friends or colleagues at work, how would you describe the events that constitute a fall? I'm going to give you the definition from NICE, which is an unintentional event whereby an individual comes to rest on the ground or another lower level, and that is with or without consciousness. So there's a couple of key points to pick up there, and that is, it is an unintentional event. It is an accident. It's not supposed to happen. The reason NICE have framed this in this way is because there have been occasions where individuals have intentionally put themselves on the ground, and I have no doubt you have heard stories or have maybe perhaps had personal experiences with this happening inside your care setting. The individual must fall down to another lower level. This is against gravity in this way. If an individual was to come to rest on the side of a wall, it would not technically be characterized as a fall. And lastly, the individual can fall or come to rest on the ground or another lower level with or without consciousness. Secondly, each year 280,000 people end up in A&E following a fall. What I'm inviting you to consider here is the effect falls have on our National Health Service. The answer, and I believe this is from 2018, the latest figure, is that it cost 2.3 billion with a B. When they came up with this figure, when they ascertained this figure, we are speaking about the collective costs. We do not sometimes come to accept or understand that there are other costs beyond simply calling an ambulance, but also bed stay, surgery, physiotherapy, and so on. So you can see why the council is very keen to have myself delivering some education around falls. Number 3, we have listing 5 factors that contribute to falls. We're going to come to this later, but I want you to invite you to think about the factors, be it internal or external, that could lead to a likelihood of having a fall. And number 4, finally, a little bit more challenging, but can you name a commonly used falls assessment tool? So this might be a question or a assessment method or process that you might have to go through a individual on admission to a care service that will tell you whether or not they are more at risk of being of falls. So we'll move on, and here we've just got some basic figures here. 1 out of 3, age 65 plus 4 each year, age 72 plus 4 every 2 years, and age 80 plus 4 once a year minimum. And this is just a general kind of figure to give you a more holistic view of how falls are affecting our society. So I'm going to move on to the FRAT, which is the Falls Risk Assessment Tool. And like I briefly explained, this would be a series of questions you would ask an individual on admission to a care service that is going to tell you whether they are more likely to be at risk of falls. We only have the first 3 up here, but I'm going to go through them with the StopFalls booklet here. The first question, is there a history of falls in the previous year? You're going to know individuals in your care service that this pertains to. The number 1 risk factor whether someone is going to be more likely to fall is history of falls. If you have fallen twice in the previous year, there is a high chance you're going to fall again. Number 2, is the client on 4 or more medications per day? This term is known as polypharmacy. When an individual is taking more than 4 medications per day, they are going to be at more risk of falling due to the side effects and the nature of the medications. Number 3, does the client have a diagnosis of stroke or Parkinson's? Again, you're going to know the clients you work with who this is relevant to, but if we take, for example, stroke, asymmetries, weaknesses on one side of the body, This again could lead to things like impaired gait, dragging of the foot, and again it's going to lead to a likelihood of falling. Number 4, does the client report any problems with their balance? Balance is going to be essential when we are talking about keeping the head above the pelvis and the center of gravity in a controlled position. Things like kyphotic posture, anterior head carriage, when the head is coming forward, again your center of gravity is moving over the baseline, is going to increase your likelihood of falling over. And number 5, is the client unable to rise from a chair of knee height without using their arms? This is going to be an indication of strength. You're going to know individuals in your care setting who are unable to rise from a chair of knee height without use of their arms. And if the individual participating in the FRAT, the individual you're using the FRAT on, if they mark yes to any of these questions, they're going to be at a more likelihood of falls. So we're going to move on now onto the impacts of falls. This is what we are trying to avoid, but we need to be realistic about the nature of falls and how they're going to translate if they are not adequately managed. We have things like loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem, becoming withdrawn, social isolation starts to come into play, not wanting to come out and interact with other residents, but remaining in their rooms. Lack of motivation, loss of independence, again this sense of personal autonomy is taken away. We mentioned about reduced social networks. Reduction in the quality of life is also very important to note, and a general decline in health and well-being. I want to talk now a little bit more in depth about the factors. We mentioned before about the 5 risk factors that were going to be conducive to someone falling, and we can make a clear delineation between those 2 categories in the internal and the external factors. So I'm going to move over to risks here, and I'm going to show you what I mean. At the top we have footwear. So footwear can be classified as an external factor that is going to put your residents and the people we care for at risk of falling. Maintaining that we have appropriate footwear, we don't have things like frayed slippers, things like that that could catch easily on the environment, is going to be important in our fight against reducing falls. Eyesight. Eyesight we would categorize as an internal factor. If we think about such conditions as cataracts or visual impairment, they are personal, they are internal, they are solely to do with the individual. And this again is something to be mindful of when we are considering reducing the risk of falls. Hydration, again, another internal factor. If we are not adequately hydrated, we are again putting ourselves in a position where we are more likely to be at risk of falls because we have a lack of energy and available strength in our muscles to again articulate ourselves through the space in the care setting we live in. Medication, we did touch on medication, that was on the FRAT. Again, if you are taking 4 or more medications, you are considered to be polypharmac. I want to kind of lay off this because we're going to go into the depth of medications a bit more comprehensively in the following slides. Environment, again, the external factors. When we think about low coffee chairs, tables, and adequate lighting, temperature even can be a factor that can put someone at risk of falls. What I would also invite you to consider when thinking about the environment is that we tend to think about things in the environment that could make us more likely to fall, but I want to incite you to think about lack of things in the environment, lack of appropriate adaptations such as grab rails, stair rails, even walking aids. A lot of walking aids I've experienced in some care services, they share walking aids. In this aspect, it's important to understand that the walking aid is tailored to the individual, and we should really consider the walking aid as the individual's personal vehicle. As my car is my independence for me to get to A to B, the walking aid serves as a personal vehicle for the people we care for to go about their personal day, have their independence. So we really need to be encouraging them to have ownership over the walking aids. And we have alcohol to finish off. Alcohol is something, again, that is an external factor having an internal effect on our physiology. And again, in the same way as medication, the side effects are going to be quite severe. Things, again, loss of balance, dizziness, and general vestibular abilities are going to be impaired. So we're going to move on now to medication. I wanted to cover this a bit more comprehensively because the likelihood of the people we care for, they're going to be on a long list of medications. Some of the clients I've had in my time here have medication sheets as long as my arm, and I'm sure that's no different from the people that you care for every day. Here we have some of the side effects. Sleepiness, general drowsiness. There are going to be some medications such as morphine or zopiclone that are going to put your residents at risk of falling. Blurred vision, dry eyes. Again, we were talking about internal factors that are going to affect the ability to navigate through the care setting. We have low blood sugar, which can be indicative of experiencing dizziness, headaches, and things of this nature. Confusion can also be a side effect. We have dizziness, I've just mentioned dizziness. Postural hypertension. When individuals stand up quite suddenly, we can experience a drop in the blood pressure from the brain. This travels down to the feet. And again, that dizziness, that lack of oxygen that is supplying the brain to keep consciousness, to keep us conscious, is going to be effective. It's hypoxic in nature. It starves the brain of oxygen. It can be quite severe if not being aware of. We have dehydration. We covered hydration in the previous slide, but again, not having adequate lubrication to things like the joints, and also the availability of energy we can withdraw from our muscles is going to put us in a vulnerable situation. Deafness, impaired vestibular system, I think I touched upon, but again, it's going to, the ears are directly related to how we maintain our balance. So having this impairment here is going to be, again, it's going to put us at risk of falling. And polypharmacy, we covered the medications above 4, which again, when we look at the side effects here, that's going to make them more prevalent and more severe in some cases. We're going to move on to equipment now. When I was speaking about the environmental factors that are going to put the people we care for at risk of falls, we touched upon the idea of walking aids and lack of appropriate adaptations, grab rails, stair rails, and so on. So we need to make sure we're checking the walking aids, they're in good condition, they're maintained, and again, that they are tailored to the individual that is using them. And again, we're just reiterating that we want the individuals to see their walking aids as their own, the extension of themselves, their own personal vehicle, and encourage them to use their own walking aid at all times. So I'm going to touch on nutrition and hydration. Again, we mentioned hydration, but we want to think as nutrition as a form of nourishment. And if we take the concept or the idea that food is medicine, it really kind of hits home the value food plays in our fight against reducing falls. Here we have some did you know, so as we get older, our sense of thirst can reduce. It's crucial in this aspect to have things like water stations available in your care home, jugs of water freely available for your residents, because the awareness, the ability to sense where we are dehydrated lessens as we get older. If we do not drink enough, we can suffer from dehydration, and again, this is very common amongst the older demographic. Dehydration is dangerous, and it can again affect cognitive function, memory, balance, and can also lead to other health complications we have here: UTIs, water infections, things of this nature. We have a little guideline here about how to aim to get the adequate amount of water, hydration in your body daily, which is about 8 cups of fluid per day. But again, I don't want you to think too much about the minutiae details, but rather what environmental adaptations can we make that are going to make water more freely available. Water stations, jugs in the lounge, things of this nature. The number one preventative measure to reducing falls is physical activity. Here I have the guidelines for older adults aged 65 and over. So we aim to have 150 minutes of moderate physical activity. Bouts should last 10 minutes or more. And we should also engage in muscle strengthening exercises at least 2 days per week. I want to kind of reference back to the questions on the FRAT. The 5th question, can the individual stand from a chair of knee height without use of their arms? This low indication of strength is going to mean that the individual is unable to retain balance and be more at risk of falls. In this way, we want to develop the muscle strength through physical activity. I'm also just going to finish off here with older adults at risk of falls should do exercises 2 days a week to improve characteristics of balance and coordination, again in the fight against reducing falls. So we have a couple of tips here on how to break up periods of sedentary activity. Individuals in care settings spend 80% of their time either sitting down or lying down, and that really hits home about how important it is to promote physical activity and movement in general in the body. There are some good tips here by breaking up sedentary activity by practicing sit to stands. Very simple exercise, something anyone can teach, but encouraging individuals when they're watching television, reading a book, if they're on the hour every hour, just stand up again, paddle the feet, making sure we're engaging in those muscles in the quad, in the thighs and the calves and the muscles in the posterior chain, and making sure again they're engaging those big strong muscles that are going to support them when they're moving through the care setting. I also want to touch upon some mobility exercises. I would encourage any of you that has access to our falls prevention booklet to have a look at some of the exercises that are going to be valuable in terms of creating a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more movement in the joints of some of the individuals we care for. We have things like ankle activators, which are going to take your ankle joint through the full range of movement from plantar and dorsiflexion. And again, when we think about the hazards in the environment, the ability to clear the ground in our gait, in our walking pattern, is going to be very, very valuable to exercise and manage when we think about reducing falls. All it takes is, I'm sure I don't need to emphasize the prevalence of shuffling gait in care settings, but if you were to walk over a carpet or a wire, you can see the severity of the end result of not exercising the ability to have freedom in the ankle joint. So that resource is going to be very valuable if you want to do some one-on-one exercises with the people you care for. And I just wanted to finish off with a couple of examples of myself in the care setting all over Hertfordshire with individuals in similar care settings, doing some chair-based exercise. Here you can see myself, I believe this was a home in Hitchin, where we are engaging in strength building exercises, again developing those muscles that are going to be conducive for us when we are trying to move about and keep our balance, keep our strength, keep healthy. Again, just some more examples. Here we have, which is quite interesting, a balance class. This is in assisted living, and I'm just going to reference back to making sure that we are engaging the individuals that are comfortable in doing so in exercises that challenge balance and challenge strength. So here you can see my lovely ladies engaging in some lovely flamingo swings to challenge their balance in a nice, controlled, comfortable environment with myself. And if you are interested in having someone trained in Otago, I will refer you to our HCPA website. And also education. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm talking to this camera. We need to make sure that we are taking the information attained on experiences such as this and in the community and channeling it through and transmuting it down to the people we work with, our colleagues, our friends, our family, the people the people that are engaging in the care of older adults. Finally, I have just a couple of interesting initiatives that are going to help in the reduction of falls. We have Fix Up Your Frame, which was an initiative to, again, I'm going to reference back the idea of taking ownership of your walking aid. It is your personal vehicle. It is your access to independence. And if we can encourage the design of said walking aid, if we can make them very personable, it can reduce the prevalence of falls. The overall scheme has reduced falls by 75% within a year. It has been invaluable to residents with dementia. Again, this is where the colours come into play and the idea of ownership. Finally, we're just going to finish on Light Your Night. This was an initiative which began in the Haven Care Home in Colchester, which has seen falls rates decline by 75%. Most falls, happen at night when residents are going to use the bathroom, and this is just a motion censored light which turns on as soon as they detect motion or movement. So the individuals who are going to the toilet don't need to think about turning the lights on and off. It just comes on. Again, that's the external environment having an impact on our risk of falls. So I'm going to conclude there. I hope you learned something valuable, and our initiative is called StopFalls. This is a Stop Falls campaign. I do want to emphasize that we cannot stop falls full stop, but we have a large degree of management over the internal and external factors that are going to put the people we care for at risk. You have a big say in how we manage these risks. Please channel the information learned in here to your friends, family, and colleagues. I hope this was valuable, and I'll conclude with that.